welcome to Blixx, all about horses and their care, where our motto is companionship, care, and commitment. I'm Gabriela Rodriguez, your host, and today our guest is Dr. Kathy Murray. Dr. Kathy Murray is the Integrated Pest Management Entomologist with the Maine Department of Agriculture, Conservation, and Forestry. Kathy, would you like to tell us a little bit about yourself?
Well, thanks for having me. I do help farmers and citizens and whoever needs a little bit of help with managing pests. I went to graduate school, found the field of entomology to be a fascinating subject, and I'm happy to share that fascination and help other people understand how insects, what the role they play in our ecosystems, and how to manage them safely so that we don't encounter them in ways that we don't want to.
Well, we did a show previously, so you're a returning guest, and our show before was about the flying insects. No, excuse me, the biting insects.
The biting insects.
So the biting insects are different from the stinging insects.
That's right.
Right?
Yes.
And so today's show, I forgot to say that today's show is called Stinging Insects, and how that relates to horses, how we can keep them comfortable, how we can keep them safe and keep ourselves safe as well, and also not destroy any more than we need to. But before we start on the stinging insects and how they affect us, can we talk a little bit more? I have a few questions about the biting insects.
Sure.
Especially the mosquitoes.
Uh-huh.
So one of my questions was, we're going to be seeing some pictures about shelter, because one of the things that I want to stress to horse owners how important shelter is, and keeping a clean environment. You're going to talk a little bit more about that too. But one of my questions with mosquitoes was, do you have any findings as far as triple E this year? It's the end of October. Today's October 30th.
Yes.
So has anything new happened?
Yes, that's we had our very first human case of triple E, Eastern equine encephalitis, this year in Maine. We have for the last number of years been able to find it in mosquitoes. We've known through taking blood samples from moose and deer that they have been exposed to triple E throughout the state. We've known it's here. We've known that the mosquitoes are carrying it. But this year, for the first time, we had a first human case. Luckily, that person survived and was treated successfully and went home and comfortably. So we're lucky that way, but it's just another warning to us that yes, triple E is here, and it's something we need to protect ourselves from, and our horses, to protect them from being bitten by those mosquitoes that carry that disease. Yes.
Now, as far as the person, we know that there's a neurological disorder that goes with triple E. So how is that person affected as far as that piece of it?
I don't know the details. About 1/3 of the people who get triple E will die. Another third will have permanent neurological impairment, and the other third will recover completely. Then again, we know that there are probably some people that never show any symptoms at all, and so it's hard to know. But I think what I've heard is that one person in Maine is okay. I'm hoping that's true.
Yeah. Now, how about horses? Any horses yet this year?
No, I have not heard of any horses this year.
Well, that's a good thing.
That is.
Because this is about the time that they're not going to be testing mosquito pools anymore, is that right?
That's right, we're done.
Okay, so it's over.
Right.
So basically, can we say we're actually safe? We still have some warm days, but there's not as many mosquitoes anymore, right?
That's right. The last 2 weekly samples have shown no triple E in the mosquitoes that were sampled. So I think that the risk is much lower. I'd never say zero, but and until we have very cold weather, consistently cold weather, people should still continue to protect themselves from mosquitoes. I think the risk is lower, but not zero.
Okay. I want to go back to the picture of the barn. There's a barn, and the reason that I'm showing these pictures is because it's very important to safeguard your horses. We live in houses. We're protected by screens, and so this barn doesn't have any screening, but it's a wonderful barn. It has big stalls for the horses, and the horses are comfortable in there. Of course, this is winter in the picture, but in the summertime, there's no reason why people can't use a building or a barn to try and help their horses during certain periods, at least, to keep them out of the elements. In the next picture, the next few pictures, actually, that's Dr. Honig with one of my horses, Lexi. We have pretty big stalls, so they're very comfortable in there. It's important to have big stalls so your horses can move around and lay down in their stalls. But we also have screening. It's kind of hard to see there, but this wasn't my idea or my invention. I actually saw it somewhere, and so I just upped the ante a little bit and did more of them. But it helps keep the insects out. but like you said, you can't keep them all out. They still get in sometimes, but it helps. And I also noticed in the summertime, if you have your doors open and the sun coming in, the flies follow the sun, right? They seem to. But when you keep a barn a little darker, they don't tend to want to go into that environment as much. That's what I have found. The next picture that we have there is a horse laying down, so you can tell that she's pretty comfortable there. And then there's Dr. Honig again with my other horse. And you can see that there's, well, you may not be able to see it, but there's screening on all the windows. And my horses do spend a considerable time inside the barn in the summertime, not only at dusk and dawn, but I have found in my situation with my insect population, because the insect populations are different everywhere, right?
Sure.
But with me, I found that they're very comfortable. They don't get infections that they normally get if they were to be outside, so I put the fans on to reduce the carbon dioxide.
Yeah.
And they have their hay, they have clean water, and it's tough for a month or two. But as soon as the temperatures go down, you were so nice to tell me exactly what figures I can trust, and that was 50 degrees or so.
About 50 degrees is when most insects will not be able to fly, and mosquitoes really are not very active at all once the temperatures get below 50 degrees.
And that really helped, because you're, as a horse owner, often wondering, is it safe to put them out, or do you keep them in? Especially when they're inside so much during the day, you really want to put them out at night. But sometimes if it's in the 70s, you shouldn't do that.
That's right.
Right.
That's right. Yep.
So we all suffer together. And the next picture, I think, shows just a nice big stall. Actually, before that picture, that's a 12 by 13 size tall, but you can see that a horse has plenty of room. That was a thoroughbred horse, 16 hands, and he had plenty of room to move around and be comfortable. So it's not a bad thing to keep them in. In the wild, they are out, but in the wild, they're not enclosed or in captivity, so they can move, they can run, they can keep themselves safer than they can sometimes in captivity. So I think it's our job to try to do as good a job as we can. And so as far as the mosquitoes go, we were talking about the sound that they make, and I just thought that was very interesting. You always hear a buzzing sound.
That's right.
Okay.
It's just their wings, that mosquitoes are such fast flyers. Their wings are beating many, many times per second, and it's that beating sound of their wings that makes that buzzing sound.
Okay, so when you hear a buzzing sound, then you know for sure it's a mosquito and not some other kind of fly. Is that true?
Well, there are some other, not entirely. Well, the stinging insects that we're going to talk about today, sometimes you'll hear that sound too. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so.
Another thing about environment, I think I want to make sure that people understand what type of environment the mosquitoes like. It seems like they like overcast days.
Well, they like moisture, humidity and moisture.
Okay.
So, but you pointed out that the sunny days, they follow the sun too. So they need warmth, they need moisture. And certainly there are mosquitoes that fly and are very active on hot summer days. There are ones that are active at night. We have so many different species of them. But mostly, I think the key characteristic is they have to have moisture somewhere, because that's where they breed.
Okay. And so that brings us to our other issue about standing water. When I was talking to Dr. Honig about standing water, I tend to try to be very conscientious. And if I see something that's collecting water, I turn it over. But there are a lot of things like big watering troughs, I guess, or buckets that they use for horses that are only cleaned out maybe every 7 days, maybe every 10 days. It's quite a bit of work, but what do you say about something like that in terms of breeding?
Well, most of the mosquitoes breed in pretty warm, shallow water. So if it's more than 6 inches deep, you're probably not going to see as much mosquito reproduction, laying their eggs in water that's deeper than 6 inches or so.
That's great. I had no idea.
But there again, if the sides of the trough are helping to warm the water, perhaps a slightly deeper. So the general recommendation is to try to overturn or empty or refresh water at least once a week.
Okay.
To prevent that, especially if you do see mosquitoes. You'll see the wrigglers, they're called, the larval stage of the mosquitoes will hatch quite quickly, and you'll see them on the surface of the water. They breathe air, so they live right on the surface of the water and have a little breathing tube that they stick up through the surface of the water and actually breathe air. So if you see them at the surface of the water, it's definitely time to refresh that water, overturn it. I've seen them, now that I think about it, that 6 inches doesn't always, because I've seen them in buckets that were 2 feet deep.
Okay, so like a 5-gallon water bucket that we use.
Yeah, because that's a small quantity of water. It's definitely going to warm up enough that mosquitoes will lay their eggs in it, and I've seen that happen in less than a week.
Okay,
so
in less than a week. So it wouldn't be a bad idea to maybe change that water a couple of times a week.
Well, if you do it once a week, you're going to prevent they won't be able to complete their entire life cycle.
Okay.
You'll see the larval stage within less than a week, but they won't be able to get to the adult stage in less than a week, probably. So I think once a week is a good rule of thumb.
Okay, all right. Now another question I have is I use my water buckets that are actually for the winter to keep the water warmer, and they have like a thermos top. Okay.
Yes.
So they have a little hole right in the center. Say I didn't change that water. Now, I have to say, I do change the water. I try to be very vigilant about that. If I don't want to drink it, I don't want them to drink it. So I do once a week in the summertime. I even put all those things into the dishwasher. If I can, or once every 2 weeks, but I try to keep things clean. But in a situation like that where you have that covering, does that decrease the chances that you're going to get more mosquitoes? Okay.
They might be able to get in through that little opening,
Yep.
but if you can cover that with a screen. But no, absolutely. Even with rain barrels, you can cover them with window screening, and a mosquito will not be able to get into there and lay their eggs. So if you do have to have standing water, covering it is a great way to keep mosquitoes from being.
Well, that's great to know that I'm doing something right.
That's right. Oh, you're doing many things right.
Okay. The other thing that I wanted to find out, where do the mosquitoes go when they're not biting you or buzzing around you? Where do they live?
Well, they rest on vegetation. In the summertime, they'll rest on shrubbery around the horse barn, so it's a good idea to kind of keep things mowed and keep shrubs and vegetation to a minimum to eliminate those resting areas around the paddock and around the horses and around our own homes.
And then hay that's spilled over and that's left there should probably be raked up too.
Well, especially for those flies.
The flies.
That can reproduce in those rotting vegetation. Yeah, that's right.
So the cleaner the better. Right?
Absolutely, absolutely. Many reasons to keep our barns and barnyards clean.
So and it's kind of a joke at home with me because my house is not as clean as my barn is. But I figure that I should do that for the horses because they're the ones that have to live out there. Right? So we talked about Triple E, so that's good news for the horses. And I had one question about ticks. We talked about ticks the last time a little bit. And regarding certain diseases, they have a lot of diseases, Lyme being one. But if you remove a tick within 24 hours, is that a good thing?
That's the general recommendation. That we know it takes more than 24 hours, really, for the tick to be able to transmit Lyme disease to the victim that they're biting. So generally, that's absolutely true. There are a couple of other diseases that we now are being transmitted by ticks, deer ticks also, Powassan virus being one, and there seems to be evidence that the tick can transmit that one more quickly. So as soon as you can get it and take it off, that's best.
Okay.
If Lyme disease is being, the most common disease that's being spread by deer ticks, sometimes up to 50% of our ticks will have Lyme disease. So, but generally, if you can get it off, and you haven't been exposed to that within 24 hours, you've done a good job, and you've protected yourself from Lyme disease.
Well, we're out there so often, and the horses are out there too. It's very difficult to check your horses. You know which places to look, but that's why I think most of the horses, it's been quoted by someone that maybe 90% of the horses in Maine probably do have something.
Wow.
Because they're outside.
Wow.
We don't find those ticks fast enough.
Well,
so
we
they've
need
been
to be
exposed.
vigilant. Yeah. Comb and brush them and groom them and check ourselves every night. Yeah, we really need to.
I have one other question, and this is regarding deer flies and horse flies, and we forgot to talk about this the last time. They transmit equine infectious anemia. Okay. As far as horses go, I guess my question or my thought on that is, usually you only have to have there's no law. Like there's a law for rabies, but there's no law that makes or has asked horse owners to have their horse's blood checked for that. So most vets, I think, recommend every 2 to 3 years. If you go to a show or you compete, then it's something that they ask for because it is infectious. But are there any other diseases that horseflies and deer flies? And for a long time I thought just horseflies transmitted that, but evidently deer flies do too.
Yes, yes. I can't think of any other ones. No, I think that's the one that we talked about with Dr. Honig. And, me not being a veterinarian, I'm not as much as up to date with that information, but that's my recollection is that was the only one that we had to
Do they transmit anything to humans, to people, those deer flies?
No, never heard of anything. Hopefully.
Hopefully not, right.
Yeah, that's right.
I did notice with deer flies are pretty persistent. They grab a hold to the top of the mane where the hair where the mane comes out, and that's where they bite. And they're very dangerous because if you're riding, you may not see them, and the horse will do almost anything.
Yes.
I've had them bite me, and they hurt a lot.
That is the concern, certainly. Yeah. We want to keep ourselves and our horses safe, and they're going to react when they're in pain and being bitten, and so. Yeah.
And so this is something else that it just came to mind. So we have all these fly sprays. We have the natural ones, and we have the medium ones, and then we have the real harsh ones, the ones that you can keep your horse safe for 2 weeks, they say.
Oh, wow.
But it seems that a lot of the insects now are resistant. What do you think about that?
Well, there are some houseflies particularly are resistant to some of the common pesticides that we used to use. I'm not, again, I can't answer that question as how much resistance we might be seeing among some of those more wild flies like horseflies and deer flies that really live out in nature, and it's nothing that we can do to help reduce populations of those. And whether they've become resistant to those, I can't say. I'm sorry, I don't know. Botanical kinds of products, mint oil kinds of products, oftentimes just don't seem to provide as much protection as sometimes we'd like, but we know they break down more quickly in sunlight, so they're not as persistent, which is probably why they don't work as well sometimes.
Right.
But it might be kind of a more comfortable alternative for some people. You just have to reapply them a little more often. So.
Yeah.
It's good to read the label, understand what the various warnings are on the label, follow the directions very carefully, as the case with any kind of pesticide, and repellents are actually considered a kind of pesticide. They are chemicals. We need to be aware of what some of the risks and benefits are and read that label very carefully.
That's very important.
It is.
Because you have so many, and if you read the labels, they're a little frightening. As far as what they tell you to beware of and what happens.
Yeah, and people should take it seriously. We don't oftentimes enough, but they're chemicals. We're exposing ourselves and our animals to them. We should. It would be beneficial for us to pay attention to what those warnings
I absolutely agree.
Yeah.
Thank you for saying that.
Yeah.
All right, so can we go on to stinging insects now?
Absolutely,
So
stinging insects.
what do you have for us?
Well, we have a slide, I think, that'll show up there, one before that one, I think. There's a variety of stinging insects that actually have a stinger, and they use it to inject venom. They use it just as a defense. They are trying to defend themselves, mostly defending a nest. But we can develop allergies to some of that venom, and our horses can too, and can even cause a very severe anaphylactic reaction, a severe immune response that can be life-threatening.
Yes, so both people and animals.
Yes, that's right.
Okay.
So it's important to be aware of them and develop an appreciation for them and learn to know what to recognize, what to look for and recognize them and avoid the risk of stings. So,
well, because with all animals, sometimes we have to learn to coexist.
We do, absolutely. They are such an important part of nature.
Yes.
Pollinators, they help control pests for us. They hunt caterpillars and feed them to their young, and so it helps to control our garden pests.
Yes.
Very beneficial. We don't want to eliminate them by any means, but as I say, we need to, as you said, learn to coexist with them. Yeah. So we put up the yellow jacket as one of the most commonly encountered and probably most vicious ones that we and our horses need to worry about. They do have a very threatening countenance, really, that yellow and black striping, or sometimes yellow and white and black striping, and they do look quite vicious.
They look like tigers.
They do. One characteristic that the yellow jackets and their kin have is that their wings, you can almost see the wing there, is narrow, looks very narrow because they fold them lengthwise at rest. So it's just one other characteristic that'll help you to distinguish them from some flies flies that have evolved ways to look very threatening too, but they're not threatening. So if they have those very narrowly folded wings, that's very likely to be a yellow jacket or a hornet.
Yeah.
And the next slide will show that one of the reasons why we have to be quite concerned about yellow jackets is because they nest in the ground. Oftentimes, many of them nest in the ground. Here you can see that there's a number of them going in and out of a small hole. And that's one thing you'll want to look for, especially later in the summer, is activity of yellow jackets, those black and yellow things flying rapidly into and out of a hole, an opening. It could be in a barn. They can build a nest inside of a barn. There are aerial yellow jackets too that build a nest up in the tree or in a barn. But it's these ones in the ground oftentimes that surprise us because wouldn't
want to step on one, would we?
That's right, and they're going to actively defend their nest. If you or your horse steps on a nest, they're going to come out and they will sting. And they sting multiple times. Unlike honeybees where they lose their stinger, yellow jackets and their kin do not, and they can sting repeatedly. And as I say, sometimes that can actually be a life-threatening situation. The next slide will show that some of the habitats where these yellow jackets nest in the ground, and that previous slide showed that you could almost see the hole where they're going in and out, but oftentimes we don't because they're hidden underneath a rock wall or a small pile of rocks.
Or some leaves?
Yes, fallen logs in the forest, low-growing vegetation, stacks of lumber or debris that we might save those building materials, but we should do it neatly and get it up off the ground. Far
and that
enough.
Reminds me, I think I have a few of those.
Oh no,
address.
Yes, those are potential sites where yellow jackets will find that, this is a good protected location for us to build an underground nest. And so that's another reason why they're so exciting for us, because we don't see them until it's too late, until we've disturbed the nest accidentally.
So can I ask you this? So say I have something like this at home, should I look at that now, look into it now, or in the middle of the summer I probably shouldn't leave it alone, right?
Right. And
wait.
Yes, they are still active. We haven't had a real good hard frost yet, and they are still going to be very, very active. So this is exactly the wrong time of year to be doing that. You'd want to start in the early spring because these, only a single queen, a few queens perhaps, are able to survive the winter. They'll go and look for a protected location under a bark flap, underneath one of those rock piles, and spend the winter. And they start fresh next year building a small colony, and it gets bigger and bigger and bigger as they produce more and more offspring. So the good news for us in our cold, harsh northern climate is that the whole rest of that colony will die, be killed by cold weather. And so any of these activities of trying to eliminate areas where they might be good nesting sites should be done early in the winter or in the spring, early in the spring before they've really had a chance to start building that large nest.
Okay, but let me go back to ticks for just a second. And because this troubled me for years and years, because they would say, well, we didn't have a really cold winter, so the ticks are still here, but then we would have cold winters, but the ticks are still here.
Ticks
survive no matter what, it seems, right?
They do. They're very hardy.
And leaves, they find survival there.
Yes.
So I have a path around my house, and some people think it's funny that I have it raked. So I like to have it manicured to a degree because I can see where my horses are walking and where I'm walking.
And you're eliminating tick habitat, so that's an excellent thing to do. That's a specific recommendation that we make.
Another star. Thank you.
Yes. Another great thing you do to reduce
risks.
It's
good exercise.
That too, right. Next slide will show us, the bald-faced hornet, which is technically another kind of yellow jacket, but they build nests up in the trees, and we tend to kind of use a common language of saying that if it's in a tree, we think of it as being a hornet. These are quite large. The queens can be up to an inch long.
Wow.
And they're characterized by that black and white markings rather than yellow and white markings, but you can see they've got that narrow wing that's been folded in half lengthwise. They live in colonies, again, just like the yellow jackets. They build, but their colonies are in a papery wasp that they build. Interestingly, they chew plant fibers and wood and then mix it with their own spit to produce that paper, which is actually kind of beautiful. And the next slide will show that one of those nests, big, large nest.
It's amazing that they can do that.
And they almost seem to come out out of nowhere, suddenly you have a basketball-sized nest in a tree or a shrub or on the side of a building or up in the eaves of your building. And it didn't come up overnight. It's just that we didn't notice it because when they're small, when the nest is small, it's just a single queen. She's laying a few eggs. She has to wait for that generation of eggs to hatch, and they'll help build the colony, make it bigger and bigger and bigger. So by August, that's when we see these large ones. But as we say, they're killed by the cold weather, all except for the new queens that will be reared out of that. So we want to learn to recognize those and learn to recognize the habitats that they are in, and do what we can to eliminate our encounters with them. They'll aggressively defend that nest, usually within a distance of only about 3 or 5 feet, unless you're mowing or some kind of running a truck. The vibrations will cause them to come out a little bit further.
Sure, yeah.
So if we can, avoid encounters with the nest and avoid getting right in the pathway of them going in and out of their nest, generally we're safe, and they're not going to sting us unless we're very close to the nest usually.
Well, let me ask you, so there's a big nest in my barn or in my loft, and I didn't notice it because we were talking earlier and you said the thing that we need to do as people is be vigilant and look.
Yes.
Look in our barn, look up at in the wood in the corners and try to get up at them when they're small. What do we do when we find something like this? Say we don't necessarily want to kill anything, but our horses might be in danger, we might be in danger. What do you do at that point?
If it's in a place where you're likely to come into contact, pretty close to the nest, I would go ahead and kill the nest. We only recommend that you do that if it's really threatening you or your horses, if it's just too close to human or horse activity.
How do you kill the nest?
Well, the best way really is to go to the hardware store and get that can of over-the-counter.
Okay, so at that point you have to do that.
I would. And you direct, it doesn't take very much at all. You want to do it in the evening or first thing in the morning when the wasps are in the nest rather than when they're out searching for food. You want to make sure in their nest.
Can you say that again? Because that was a really important point. You do it when?
They sleep at night. So
like us.
At night, right about dusk is the time that they'll start coming back into the nest and saying so. I've waited till dark, and I use a headlamp to do it. You want to...
so it's a surprise attack?
That's right. You could wait till dawn and do it when the sun is coming up. Yes, surprise attack. That's right, like army warfare or something. But you get the kind, read the label very carefully. Probably want to wear gloves. Make sure that the wind is not going to blow it right towards your face.
That's a good point.
If it is inside of a barn, you would want to make sure you've got good ventilation so that you're not spraying a wasp spray.
The hay and everything else.
Yes. And then direct the spray right into that opening of the nest. You don't need to saturate the entire area. Just direct a spray right into the opening of the nest because there'll be some wasps defending that little opening, so you want to kill them first. And then maybe apply a little bit more just to the outside of that nest. And that's all, just a couple of seconds spray, and that'll kill the nest. If you're very, very brave and really don't want to use pesticides, it is possible if you wear a full-on bee suit.
Everybody has one of those, right?
That's right. And you could knock the nest down and capture it into a garbage bag and tie it closed and then leave it out in the sun. But by far the safest and easiest way is to take advantage of that one time we want to use a pesticide safely
Okay, well, it's good to know also that you're being responsible by using the pesticides, because sometimes I'm just in a quandary trying to figure out what to do, but I don't want my horses to get stung, and I don't want to get stung.
That's right.
Either.
It's a matter of balancing those risks, right? The risk of stings is so much greater that the small chance of, exposing ourselves to a pesticide. And like you point out, you don't want to kill a nest because they're very beneficial. They're out hunting caterpillars that are eating our garden and pollinating plants for us. So unless they're really threatening us because they're too close to us and where our activity is, you don't need to control them.
Okay, that's really, really good information. There was something that we talked about before that I didn't know. I thought hornets were one thing, wasps were another thing, and yellow jackets were something else, and of course bees. Everybody's heard of honeybees, but I thought they were all different things. Can you explain that situation?
Well, wasp is kind of a generic term.
Okay.
So anything that oftentimes stings, I guess, is what we would call a wasp. Bees, they can sting, but some of them are stingless. So they're all in the Hymenoptera. They're all related to ants. Bees, wasps, and ants are all in the same order of. I know.
That doesn't make sense, though, does it?
Well, if you think about it, there are some ants that do sting, and many ants do bite.
That's right.
Yeah. So they have a stinger.
That's right.
But many, the vast majority of these are very tiny little, very beneficial wasps, really. So tiny we'd never notice them, but they're feeding and parasitizing or predating on some of our pests. So they're really an important biological control agent for us. Greenhouse growers actually purchase and release some of these little tiny wasps into their greenhouses to help control greenhouse pests. So for those that we they're out working hard for us and benefiting us, but we don't even pay attention to them. But the ones that we do need to pay attention to the hornets. We actually technically don't have any hornets in North America, other than one that was introduced from Europe. And I'm not positive that we have it in Maine. It's only been found in a few places. Somewhere in the central and northern part of the country, but I'm not positive that we do have it in Maine. But the vast majority of the ones that we have to worry about are ones that are yellow jackets or related to yellow jackets, like that bald-faced hornet. Okay,
well, it's good to know, what you're dealing with.
Yes.
Well, especially if you're out there and you have to be out there in the elements every day taking care of these animals.
That's right. And so they're attracted to sugar. They like to eat sugar. They're kind of like people, I guess, that way.
They have a sugar high.
That's right.
They
forage on sugar. They also like protein and meats. So we find them in our barbecue grill. And we have learned to, my husband, the grillmeister, has learned to clean out the grill and get all the drippings.
That's great information.
Yeah, and clean that and throw that away so that the wasps won't. They started building nests every week, pretty much underneath the grill, because it was easy access to the fat and the meat drippings. So once we eliminated that, we don't have that problem anymore. But dropped fruits, if you have apple trees or crabapple trees, you want to rake those out, get the dropped fruits away so that you're not providing extra food for these foraging yellow jackets.
That makes a lot of sense. We have apple trees, and there are other animals that like to eat the apples once they're on the ground, like possums are one. And horses have problem with certain. They have issues with certain things, so we try to keep those out. But I had no idea that those were something that the bees, that the stinging insects like too. So that's another reason to pick things up.
That's right. Keep
when you're walking
clean.
around, pick it up and keep it clean. Yes. So what insect is the biggest threat to someone on a trail ride? This is the time where people go on trail rides. It's beautiful outside. The leaves are changing colors. So people take their horses and they go on a nice trail ride. Usually trail rides are just, the majority of people just walk. So it's a slow pace. They're not running. If they're running, say in a hunt or a hunter pace, I think there's probably less of a chance, right? Because if you're running, they're not going to catch you as fast as they would if you're just walking. And if you have 15, even 10 riders, one horse after another. So the process of one horse stepping on a nest could just really cause a That's
problem. Exactly what happens. We disturb the nest. The first one, and the hikers encounter the same thing. The first person along or the first horse disturbs the nest, and then they come out and aggressively defend that nest by stinging whatever comes along right after that. And so keeping some distance between horses on a trail ride might be one way to do that. Another way would be to really stick, especially late in the summer when the hives are very big, those underground nests are large, is to stick to trails that have been ridden a lot. That's not the good time to go out and
investigate.
Forage
a new trail.
Exactly. Stick to trails that have been well used and are groomed and mowed and that kind of thing. And just kind of keep your eyes peeled in the trees, maybe for those large nests, because you don't want to get too close to those large aerial nests, either the ones that are in the trees.
Because the horses will panic too.
Oh yeah.
The horses, first, I don't know who panics first, but when the horses see something like that, their instinct is to run.
Yes.
And it could cause a really big problem. The riders could come off. The horses get stung. And the other thing too, I was thinking it's probably a good idea to keep Benadryl around for horse and rider.
Yes, and if people know that they're allergic, you'll want to carry an EpiPen with you, and
that's
little
a great
injector
idea.
of epinephrine. And I think horses the same, right? You talk to your veterinarian if your horse has shown symptoms of a severe reaction. You probably want to carry one.
It can happen.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes people think that because horses have a little bit of fur, they can't get stung, but that's absolutely not true.
That's
they
right.
can get bitten and stung, and all those things happen.
That's right. Bears perhaps can tolerate.
They're the only ones.
Yeah,
right?
they can dig up those nests and eat the
honey.
And eat the young larvae, a good source of protein, and not get stung too badly because they've got very thick fur. But we did want to mention a few other. Next slide. Oh yeah, there's the paper wasps is one more group. They're also they've got that narrow wing, so they're closely related to the yellow jackets and that white-faced bald hornet, we call it, though even it's really a yellow jacket.
Yeah.
Paper wasps are another one we may encounter. They're beautiful in a way, often very important pollinators. They're a little bit different from the previous ones, the yellow jackets and that bald-faced hornet, in that they're not nearly as aggressive. The next slide will show, I think, the nest is not enclosed in a paper round basketball shaped kind of nest, but just a small open comb. So if we see a small open comb, maybe attached to, in this case, a plant, I oftentimes see them under the eaves of my house. You might see them under the eaves of your barn or inside the barn.
Yep.
A small thing just attached by a narrow little pedicel, a little stalk. You can see they have very long legs, and that little inset, you can see that the legs are actually hanging down when they fly. It makes them look kind of odd.
Oh, wow, that is funny.
Not very aggressive and not very much of a concern. So I oftentimes don't worry very much about those at all. They can sting, but because their colonies are so small and they're fairly non-aggressive, they don't pose nearly the risk that the bigger ones do.
Right.
So unless they're just really close to activity where you're feeding animals or being active, or your horses are being very active, I don't worry about those too much. But then the next set of slides I wanted to show, there's another one that can sting us. It's the honeybee.
Okay.
The honeybee, we all know honeybees are quite threatened right now. There've been a number of diseases and parasites have been introduced. The honeybee actually is not from it's not native to this country either. It was brought by our early colonists here to provide honey for us. They're very beneficial. They say for every third bite of food we take, we need to thank a pollinator, and honeybees did do about 80% of our pollination, producing food for us. And we have much to be thankful for them. They can sting, but only if you're really almost, crushing one.
Right. Well, that's typical of almost any animal.
That's right. That's right. So I wanted to mention them, but they're furrier. They may have some of the stripes, but they don't fold their wings.
Pretty.
They are. They're very important pollinators. So there again, the next slide will show that sometimes this is where I'll get calls when the honeybees. Oftentimes we see them in their box. They're being maintained by a person, and they live in a artificially constructed hive out of a box. But oftentimes actually, when the colony gets too large, they say it's time for us to split off and send some young ones off to form their own colony. And they call that a cluster. Part of the colony will form a cluster in a tree. You can see on the right that large cluster. They're not on a nest. It's just a massive ball of honeybees. They're not threatening anybody at this point. They are really only interested in finding a new place to build a nest. And they can actually build a nest. There on the left you'll see those honeycombs hanging down. They have found a place to build right in a protected location within a tree. So it is possible. And the next slide will show bumblebees. And you had a very interesting story, and I don't know if we'll show that slide next, but we think it was a bumblebee that started a small colony inside of a backpack.
That's amazing.
Which is pretty unusual, but they will nest in small cavities, oftentimes like a mouse hole in the ground. But there again, their colonies are small. They don't aggressively go after us, so we really just need to appreciate the try to avoid crushing one because you could get stung.
Right.
But just appreciate that.
Keep your eyes open.
That's right. That's right.
And keep your ears open for the buzzing sound of mosquitoes.
That's right. And then there are a series of slides showing some of our other native bees like this one. We have over 370 species of solitary bees in Maine. Many of them beautiful, like this
They are
sweat
very
bee.
beautiful. The colors are amazing.
They are. We call them solitary because they don't build those large colonies like honeybees and yellow jackets do. So they just live in very small nests in the ground. Next slide will show a colony or an aggregation of these native solitary nesting bees where they might build a couple of holes in the ground, but just avoiding those and not stepping right on them. But even if you step right on them, some of them are stingless and really don't pose a threat to us at all.
Yeah.
There's one of our native solitary bees coming out of its little hole in the ground, and you can see there's a little cluster of those holes in the ground, but each one of those will have just a single bee and a couple of her offspring inside it. So,
how long do they live? Just like a season?
Just a year, yeah.
A year,
yeah.
okay.
Not even a whole year, but yes, a single season.
Okay, and here's another question I just thought of right now. What about butterflies?
Single season.
Yeah, but are butterflies related to, they're butterflies? Are they flies?
Oh yeah, no, they're insects.
Thought of that right now.
That's right. No, they're different, but they're insects.
Yeah.
So yeah, they're all related.
Okay.
Yeah, but not closely related.
I'm hoping we can see a picture. There's a picture of a backpack.
Oh yeah.
With I have a training backpack.
Yeah.
Oh, there's another picture that we didn't see. Did we see that picture?
Yeah. Well, this one and the one previous to this were showing that some of the things that we can do around our barnyards too. I think he's going to go to your slides, perhaps. Well, here, let's just mention that as long as we're here.
Okay, go ahead.
That these are some of the things that we can do to eliminate risks of stinging insects around our barns and our homes, is to eliminate debris piles. You can see that culvert there would be a terrible place, a good place for a stinging insect to build a nest.
And that's the end of a fence.
That is actually the end of a clothesline, I think. But it's the idea that any kind of small opening that we can seal, that would a small opening going into a small opening where, in this case, a pipe, another place where some of those, in this case, paper wasps had built their nest. Mowing to keep vegetation down is another good way to eliminate those sites, to reduce tick encounters, to reduce encounters with stinging insects. Don't want to do that this time of year. Wait till spring and do it then. So mowing down vegetation.
Yeah.
And there,
this
again,
is a good picture.
About avoiding, this person's going on a trail ride right through a fresh.
Thank you.
Yeah. Early in the spring, maybe,
horse.
but right. This is the wrong time of year. And then finally, those resources that are available at our gotpests.org website is a great resource for people to find any information about pests and how to avoid them and minimize our risk. And then your University of Maine Cooperative Extension offices can identify insects and give you good recommendations on what to do about them.
Good.
Then maybe we'll get a chance to see that slide of yours that showed the bumblebee that.
I think that's the picture right there. So if it's going to be on the screen, there it is. Yeah. So I have what I call a couple of training backpacks. I take them with me when I go and work with other people's horses. And one of these contains a lot of items to desensitize. If they've never seen something glittery, which is what I have right there at the very bottom of the picture, you see that glittery black, it was a little purse, actually, a little cute little purse. But it's good because they don't know what it is, and it's great for the horses. But there's the remnants of what you think may have been a honeybee. Bumblebee nest, yeah. Okay. Yeah, which is unusual that a bumblebee would find that training backpack to be a good place to build a nest, but I think that's what happened. They found a cavity, an opening, and it hadn't been disturbed in a while. And if I had put my hand in,
well, you would have
with that, or my head in, like I do sometimes. I open things up and look. Right, they're in big trouble because I did get stung. They all came out.
Oh yeah.
And I ran.
I don't blame you. I don't blame you at all. That's right. So,
it could be anywhere. You have to be vigilant.
You do.
And close things up. It doesn't hurt to seal things.
That's right.
So, and then the next picture after this shows what people do sometimes with their horses to help their horses understand how to lead the way, and it's used for a variety of things. But here's the horse going first and the person after. So if the horse stepped on something, there's a good that person might get stung.
That's right.
I think it's later in the year because it looks like it's cold. Maybe there's already been a frost.
Probably.
But you have to be careful where you're going and where you're taking your horse.
That's right.
Besides trail rides. And then the next picture, it's just a happy picture of people that have gone on a hunt. And I just want to mention, here in Maine, we don't hunt anything. They drag the scent, and the hounds go after that. But it's a big part of what people do in autumn, in the fall. But the horses are usually going fairly fast, and so they have less of a risk probably because the fields on the good hunts are generally manicured.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
So if you want to do something, do it in a place where you think you're going to be safe.
Yes.
Right?
Right, an open mode area.
Yes.
Yeah.
And then the last, I think that's it. So I always like to end the shows with a happy picture. So there's a picture of a horse looking like a moose, I think.
It does. It does.
And so do you have anything else that you want to add? It's a very interesting show, and I really appreciate you coming to explain all these things.
Oh, I think we've covered it, so thanks for having me. It's always a pleasure.
Okay, and maybe we'll do it again. And this is Gabriela Rodriguez. Thank you very much for joining us. Join us again, and remember to enjoy your horse, care for your horse, and keep your horse. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.